Hello, work besties. Have you ever felt like your workplace is missing something? Like that true inclusivity, the belonging, and the support that we always love to talk about? Well, today we're talking with someone very special who's changing that. Delphia Howze is a powerhouse in HR and diversity inclusivity, leading the charge in creating workplace dynamics where everyone can thrive. She's breaking down those biggest mistakes that companies make and how work besties can really be allies, which I know you love chatting about.
Yes.
And stay tuned to the very, very end because you will hear that one simple change that you can make today.
So if you care about workplace culture and making a real impact, you don't want to miss that. So let's dive in. Hi, I'm Claude.
And I'm Jess.
We are corporate employees by day, entrepreneurs by night, and work besties for life.
Join us as we explore how work besties lift each other up, laugh through the chaos, and thrive together in every industry.
Work besties!
Welcome!
Hi, Delphia.
We're
Hello.
so excited to have you.
How are you? I'm so happy to be here.
We thought you could kick it off by telling our work bestie community a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So my name is Delphia Howze, and I do believe that I'm probably the only one with that name in the world. And so I'm easy to find, but I am an individual who has been doing the work of inclusion for more than 25 years, quite honestly. And I'm very passionate about it. I am the owner of D House Solutions, which is a consultancy around inclusion strategy. I am also the author of a book titled Including You that was just released, which focuses on how we can create more inclusive environments one by one and that everyone has a level of responsibility to do so. I'm also an executive for a large scale national entity that I have to keep separate. I've been doing this work for a long time and I love it.
Very impressive.
And very important.
So it sounds like you've got a lot on your plate, but in the past, because I looked at your resume, you've worked at a number of different industries, kind of varied too, not all similar. So I'm curious from your perspective, what's been that defining moment in your career?
Ooh, my defining moment in my career full transparency, when I was in college, my dream was to go and become the top attorney in the world,
Mm-hmm.
right? Take the world by storm. I quickly learned once I entered law school that probably was not a good idea for me. And the defining moment in my career was when I was in banking. I was in a position where I was a bank officer and I had responsibility for a number of locations, regional banks. And I realized that we were not as profitable in some areas as opposed to others. And I just started to do some assessing in terms of who we were engaging with, how we were engaging, who were the managers that I was hiring, who we were bringing in to lead these efforts, and realized quite quickly that there was a disconnect in terms of who we hired and how they were able to connect with the community to build relationships. And essentially what the challenge was, we would bring in individuals from college backgrounds and have them in urban settings who they weren't familiar with interacting with that type of environment. And I said, hey, wait a minute, we have a problem here. We're missing opportunity. Spoke to our president and he literally said, Delphia, I don't know what to do with it. If you can figure it out and if it's that important to you, do something about it. And that's probably the worst thing that anyone could ever say to me because I go full speed ahead. From there, I started the first diversity program. I focused on affirmative action programming. I also focused on how are we building relationships within the community and built the first program for that bank. And that's how I got started into this work. It was all about how do we create connections, ultimately inclusion. Back then, I wasn't thinking about the terminology, but that I think was the defining moment.
That's
That is
really
incredible.
impressive because it's to your point, it wasn't necessarily something that was discussed or talked about
Back in the
then.
time.
At the ethos of it, that is how we all need to be thinking,
Yeah.
how you want to connect to your community and really kind of develop that. And I love that you leaned in. You were like, challenge me, I will take that.
And it's so funny because you say it's the worst that someone can say to me, but it's the best. If you think about it, that's the best that someone could tell you because then you were able to implement. this program.
Yeah, that's true. And it made me feel an element of trust and support at the same time because either he really didn't care, which is possible, or he trusted in my ability to do something impactful. So yeah, it's a double-edged sword, but I'll take the challenge any day.
That's great.
So I kind of think that parlays perfectly into why we were so excited to chat about you, which is to really dig into the diversity and inclusivity. What's that biggest misconception about diversity and inclusivity that you can think of that happens in the workplace?
I think the biggest misconception is that it's all about them, those people over there. It's only for someone else other than me, whoever I am. I think that lends to the challenge that it's all about others. It's all about a certain demographic group. It's all about preferential treatment and illegal discrimination and all of these things. I think that huge misconception has led us to where we are today with the revoking of executive orders and the attack on DEI, right? And I do believe that we as a society have not defined it well, which is why that's where we are. Everyone's coming at it from so many different points of understanding. And if you break down diversity, equity, inclusion independently, not as an acronym, as words, diversity is about mixture, right? Equity is about fairness. Inclusion is about bringing people together. And so when you think about it that way, it's all about eradicating the misconception that when you smush those letters together, that acronym together, that it means others and discrimination and reverse discrimination and all of these negative things. So I think that's the biggest misconception in the workplace, that it doesn't have that whoever I am, have a part.
I think that's fair. One of the misconceptions is that it starts at the executive level and it's just supposed to be there. While I do believe there's a role for the executives, and we'll get to that in a minute, where do you think the most impact can occur from a DEI within a workplace?
Yeah, I think the greatest impact can occur from individual perspective. So we can put policies, laws, regulations out there all day long. But if they're not, with regard to this work, if they're not coming from a place of intimacy, passionate intimacy around this work, then I think we're missing the boat. So I think the greatest level of impact will come from the individual perspective of someone leaning into the opportunity to understand themselves and to understand the topic in the environment and recognize that others, right, whoever we consider as others, really are valuable in our environments, in our world.
And how do you handle the resistance from the leadership?
I've handled that in many different situations, unfortunately. The biggest way that I've been able to overcome that resistance is by making it personal. So when I have an executive or any employee or any individual who I'm working with who says, no, that's not important. And believe me, I've had senior level executives say, Delphia, I don't even know why you're here. This isn't important. But when you break it down to help them to see how it impacts their world, how they are a part of this, it makes it easy. I'll give you a perfect example. I once worked with a senior vice president in one of my former organizations, and he was blessed with 2 daughters, right? And both were in college. They were a year apart. One had graduated and the other was preparing to graduate from college. And he said to me, Delphia, my daughter is not getting hired, getting positions. And he suspected it was because she was a young woman and he worked in a male-dominated industry. So he kind of knew the language that was going around. Long story short, he said, I don't understand why she's not getting these opportunities when she is very well qualified for it and should be hired. And I said, well, let's think about it. Where is she applying and who is she applying with? And he broke it. And I didn't say anything else. And he started looking down the list and said, I see what this element of the concept of the reverse discrimination is coming from. I feel that my daughter is not being treated fairly simply based off of her sex. And because of that, he was able to now internalize how he potentially impacted other women, right? That experience that he had, because prior to that conversation, he said, you know what, I probably have thwarted opportunities for success for women because I don't believe that they can be successful in this dynamic workplace, right? That was his mindset. Not that he was wrong for having that, but that's what he believed. He believed work was demanding, work was challenging, that women were going to come in, they were going to raise a family, they were going to go off and have babies, and they couldn't commit to the work. But now he saw from the other side the impact, someone that he loved, someone that was a part of his world, and he saw how that was negatively impacting them.
I think one of the biggest conception also is that people think of DEI that we would put, for example, let's say a woman in a position because we need to have more women. She got into that position because she's a woman, not because of her qualification. When it's totally different, right? At the end of the day, you're not going to push someone that has better qualification for someone that is lesser qualified, but you need to do your quota. I think that's also a big misconception.
Yes, and it's a challenge because we've gotten into this mindset where some people believe that as women, minorities, whatever the case may be, we're getting into the workforce, that it wasn't merit based. Any employer or recruiter or manager that's hiring someone should always be looking for the best qualified candidate. Always, right? It shouldn't be, oh, well, we need women, we need a person of color, so let's go and pick one and pluck one. And unfortunately, that has happened. That's probably happened in some organizations, but the reality is that's not the way it should be, and it doesn't create an opportunity for a meritocracy for people to get in based off of their merit, their ability to be successful. Think about the person who gets into a position just because, oh yeah, you're the quota, so let's get in here and put you in here. That's not setting anyone up for success, the organization nor the person, right? So any time that a person's being brought into an organization, it should be based off of their skills, qualifications, their ability to be successful, barring anything else.
Right. And I think the point of the DEI initiatives wasn't necessarily to create ways to navigate around that. It was to remind people of everybody has strong qualifications and you shouldn't be creating those biases or misconceptions ahead of time, to put everybody on the level playing field and let them showcase those skills and qualities to you.
Absolutely. It's all about opening the doors, right? Unfortunately, throughout our history, the doors were closed to certain groups and certain individuals. And those individuals, some of them had the qualifications that would meet, but they couldn't even get their toe. Couldn't even get a toenail in the door, right? So it was all about opening the door so that we can really see a full landscape of viable candidates from all groups. So we've missed that opportunity, and somehow we got waylaid in what our intention was around DEI, which I think is part of the challenge as to why we're
So along that, Delphia, I do think there are some instances where it's not intentional, let's say, that organizations or individuals are purposely doing this, but it is a lot of times being overlooked and not addressed. So are there certain workplace cultures or elements that you've consistently seen that are unintentional ways that in the DEI initiatives are being excluded?
Yeah. That they're being excluded. When you think about DEI and it being excluded away from opportunities for success towards the organizational mission, I do believe that when individuals, whether it's leadership or employees or the organizational culture as a whole, does not have an element or a foundation rooted on the why. Why are they doing this? What's the reason? Why are they focusing on elements of diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging? Why is that even necessary? If they can't answer that question, that's where the exclusion and the misunderstandings come forward. Because if you're doing it just to check the box or just to, one up your competitor or just to, for whatever reason, then, and you're not answering an absolute why, that's where the challenge comes in. And I will say, if you're doing a DEI initiative, it's never going to be successful. If you have DEI programming, if you have, things that are set aside from the organizational structure, that's where you're missing opportunity. It should be an everyday woven, fluid opportunity to create a foundation and a sustainable environment that's rooted in valuing employees, your people, and creating an environment of inclusion and ultimately success.
Right. So not creating some of the separation, but the interwoven element.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because then when you put it just a program on its side, then it doesn't make it authentic, right?
Yes, yes.
As you know, our whole ethos of this podcast is about work besties. And we're big proponents of supporting each other, not just your own individual work besties, but the whole work bestie community out there. So how can this strong work bestie community that we've created, how can they contribute to this cause and help with the DEI?
Yes, I love that question. I think the big thing is supporting one another, right? This isn't easy, right? Because it deals with emotion, it deals with baggage that people have, it deals with elements of discomfort and even misunderstanding. And then you have to add in all of the societal rhetoric that goes along with it. So I think the big thing is in the bestie community is really, I actually have to. The first thing is really shining the flashlight on yourself, right? Understanding your very own perspective and comfort level with this topic, right? Many of us grow up in areas that insulate us, right? We grow up in a family with people who look like us. We live in communities with people who look and think like us. We learn from that community in certain ways. And so there's all these little bubbles of different types. And I'm not talking just about race or gender. I'm talking about just different points of diversity of thought and things of that nature. Once we take time to understand our perspectives, understand our biases that we have, because we all have them, get comfortable with those biases and understand how we can mitigate them effectively, right? I think that's step number one. You have to do that internal reflection first. Step number two is then taking time to pull in your bestie, your work bestie, and say, hey, I see you, right? And realize that it's impossible to see the world completely without the perspectives of others. It's just impossible. So allowing that time for internal reflection and then the opportunity to pull in others with regard to seeing them completely for all the things that you thought you knew and all the things you do not know.
Yeah, I love this. And I have an example actually for myself where about pulling someone, right? A friend of mine, we have something in common. And like, for example, it was our children. And it's an individual that we are in different walk of life, different, path. And I would have never been friend with her. And because we had this something in common, we became friends and we really became very much friends. It would have been if we had that bias, and because we are not coming from the same, culture, the same whatever social. I know that without this friend, my life would have been much emptier. So I love to have this, pulling people that are different from us. And again, it's not about race, about gender, about social economy. If you don't extend yourself to people, you might miss a lot
I
and
love that.
something in your life that is going to be enriched.
So very true. I agree with you 100%. That's a path that is not easy to do, right? Because sometimes we just want people to be like us, right? We all like ourselves, right? We think we're great and wonderful, right?
Yeah.
Everybody else needs to get their stuff together, right? We're good. But the reality, I love what you said. I agree with your perspective, and we just need to be able to pull people in and be able to see the world from different perspectives in order to fully understand the world.
Right.
We learn from each other.
We're a patchwork for a reason. We shouldn't all be exact replicas of each other.
No, otherwise it's boring.
Yes, it would be boring.
It would be really boring.
It would be so boring.
Really would.
Like we always laugh, right? Like we are the yin and the yang. It is so true. We are so different, but we have this friendship in common. And our difference, what makes it exciting too.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, we challenge each other every single day.
I love it, and it's
whether we want to or not.
Yeah, it's the same in a marriage, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
We marry, people who we love, and some will say our best friends and all of that. That's true. But they bring a different perspective, right? Drive you crazy sometimes.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
but love them dearly because they, my husband he is the total opposite of me. If we do any personality assessments, we're always like,
The polar opposites.
polar opposites, right? But I love it because we ground each other.
Yeah.
We bring into light what the others cannot see.
Yeah.
What the other can't see, and it can be frustrating and maddening sometimes, but it's definitely valuable when you get over that frustration.
You bring up some really good points too, that you want to surround yourself with different perspectives, different personalities, different ways of being, and you'll get to a point at some point where you do have that trust, so you don't have to worry about it. But you still want to push the boundaries and be okay with people you don't trust yet, just because it's good to have a remembrance that there's so many different people out there and that you could lean in and wind up becoming close to these people.
Exactly. And then sometimes if you don't have this thing where you have, it's okay also. At least you reach out, you can still help. You don't become besties or whatever, but at least you bring your hand.
Yes. And you don't allow your biases to impede that opportunity, right?
Exactly.
Our biases are a part of us for a reason, right? They're designed to keep us safe, to, steer us away from those things that might cause us discomfort or harm or what have you. And if we encounter someone who visually represents something that's not comfortable for us, that we don't understand, that we may not like or what have you, our natural tendency is to kind of pull away from that. I say lean into it, right? I've been doing this work for more than 25 years, and I still very recently even had situations where I saw someone, I'm like, well, I should stay away from that. And for whatever reason, we ended up talking, just because I run my mouth so much. But, we ended up talking, and I learned so much from this individual. I'm thinking about a gentleman who had a hat on that was very offensive to me. And we were at a hotel in the lobby bar. And I saw him, like, oh my gosh, I can't sit next to him, but it was the only seat. So I sat there, and just through us ordering, we started talking. And then as we talked, that trust built a little bit, and I was able to ask him about his hat. And I said, help me to understand what it means. It was pretty graphic, so I won't even say what it was.
Okay. Now I'm curious.
And why would you have that on your head? And he explained it to me. And from what he shared, it made perfect sense. But because it wasn't a part of my experience and it gave me discomfort, I was ready to write him off. And I'm so glad that I didn't, because we had a fantastic conversation.
It's again this inclusion, right?
Yes.
It goes back to inclusion.
That's an interesting one. Now I'm like really curious to know what was on the hat. You have to tell us off the pod.
But and I think also it takes a strong person to still go behind the bias and open up and trying to understand the other side.
Yes.
It's not that easy.
Well, I
Not
think
at all.
in fairness, I don't know if it's not that easy. It's just that our brains are wired to do the easiest thing, which is shut down and become stay in your little bubble.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think you brought it up in one of your very first answers. It's the recognition. Once you recognize, then it continue to challenge yourself. Because I agree, there's so many times, Delphia, that I randomly will talk to people that I had no real intention of having a connection with, and you wind up having these really heartwarming conversations. And it's just because I took the chance. I could have been rude. I could have just walked right by, but you took a chance. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I love what you said. Our brains are so darn lazy, right? They do. We take those mental associations, the path of least resistance, right? That's what it does. And if we don't check ourselves to to step outside of that, we miss those opportunities for, like you said, meeting great people, building good relationships with others that we would have never even given consideration to.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to bring us back a little bit to the workplace.
Yes.
And see ethos of us. A lot of the DEI initiatives that we hear of are about workplace. However, I agree they can be incorporated into everyday life and it should be woven into who you are. From your perspective, though, going back to our work bestie environment, I do think leadership does play a role in it. What are some ways that leadership can really help with this?
I think the big one is model the behavior, right? So it's one thing to walk the walk, and it's another thing to talk the talk, right? You could have a leader who says, "Oh yeah, it's important. Yes, now go and do it," right? Or you can have a leader that says, "It's important. Here's the reasons why, and here's how we'll do it together." And so I think it's, modeling the behavior of being engaged in the efforts versus as being a leader who delegates it off to others and says, okay, well, that's your problem. Go ahead and handle it and manage it. We've heard all about servant leadership and different types of leadership. In this space, a leader is someone who is really in lockstep with everyone, to make sure that they are modeling the behavior and that they are comfortable with being vulnerable in this space, because they're not going to know everything, right?
Young, say, walk me through what you mean by the vulnerability.
Yeah. So when I was, when I was writing my book, right, I did interviews with CEOs, lots of leaders, to understand their perspective around inclusion and how it worked for them. And what I heard was, and this is what people would say to me, I don't want to touch it because I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want people to think that I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to offend. It was all of these negative potential outcomes that caused them to not engage in it at all, and caused them to be uncomfortable. So my recommendation, my thought is, that's all about vulnerability. We as leaders need to be vulnerable to be able to say, hey, I don't got the answers to everything.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer. My career wasn't built upon leading inclusion. My career was built because, great at numbers, or I'm a scientist, or whatever the case may be, right? That's why I've grown professional. We don't teach people how to do that. And so once a leader is nominated, selected, hired, or what have you for the position, now they have this responsibility of inclusion. Oh my gosh, it's uncomfortable. Let me just get back to my work, right? And do that instead.
The thing that I am good at, which is the numbers, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. So that vulnerability, allowing people to be vulnerable in the fact that they don't have to know everything, so that they can continue to learn something. Does that make sense?
If I could reframe a little bit of what you're saying, it isn't just the leadership's responsibility. They're allowed to not know everything. And by offering up the vulnerability, it gives everyone the equal playing field to say, well, I have some ideas. Here's some things that I would think about, and gives them comfort level to really step up and talk about those things.
For sure.
I applaud that. I think that's a really different way of spinning it that I haven't heard before.
Yeah.
I think that really could make or break some organizations in that way.
Agreed. Vulnerability is not a weakness. It's actually a strength.
On the contrary.
No. And you kind of hit the nail on the head with so many individuals move up the ranks to leadership levels because of the skills that they bring, which usually are more...
But not the human side.
Are usually more the tactical elements that relate to the job, not the community element, the people person, than the people management. So having the vulnerability and wherewithal to say, hey, I'm not strong in this, or I don't know this.
Right.
Let's lean in together.
Absolutely.
At the same time, I feel like, and I don't know if it's a bit controversial what I'm going to say, it is quite baffling that we need to have programs to teach people to be inclusive. We are all human, right? For me, so that's why it's a bit controversial. But it's like, why?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I do keynotes and presentations, and one thing I love to say is, let's go back to our kindergarten selves, right?
Yeah.
What did we learn in kindergarten? We learned to be nice, don't bite, talk nicely, please, thank you, all of these things, right?
You learn to work it out, too.
Yeah. And then somewhere along the line, we lose that and become these crazy humans that we are.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I do think in certain fields and industries, and some of which you've been in, be like a lawyer. I think, did you have banking too or something?
Banking.
Banking at the beginning.
Yeah. I mean, so you're in a lot of these industries where when you're working through the tiers to get up that ladder, you are pushing past other people. So that mentality continues along the ladder. So I think I get why you're saying what you're saying. I don't agree with these people and why they're doing it, but I kind of understand why, because there's still some of this mentality of I had to do it.
Yeah.
I had to push through. And that's what I think we have to break, because it's never should have happened to anyone. That's never should have been the way of moving through an organization or an industry.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'm not saying that we should not do the program. It's just that
No, I know.
how did
You're
we
saying you don't get
become
how we
this?
even got here.
How did we
But
got here?
Yeah.
But
I
again,
think
we push
we
these
just
people out of the way to make it a certain group.
Right. Yeah, and it is mind-boggling, because it makes you wonder, why can't we just, you know, like I said, get back to our kindergarten selves,
Yeah.
right? If we do that and remember what, our kindergarten teacher taught us, that's the whole empathy side. That's that whole inclusion side, right? Well, the skills, the knowledge, and ability to do our job are going to happen, but
Yes.
somehow we lose sight of that other. I shouldn't say we. Many, oftentimes,
Yes.
that sight is lost of that, all of those other human-centric pieces of information and intellect that help us to build relationships.
Yeah.
So you've talked a little bit about your book. Would you mind telling us more about it? Because I believe in the book you do go into some of the roles people play when it comes to this.
Yes. So this book was something that was in the making in my head for probably 7 years. And
Oh, wow.
finally I sat down and did it. So the book is titled Including You, Leading Inclusion from Where You Are. And it's a book that focuses on the mindset that everyone can be a part of creating inclusive environments, even you. Yes, you included, right? That's why it's called Including You. And the premise of it is, the reality is that every person has likely experienced some element of exclusion, right? And throughout our lives, whether it was back in kindergarten, whether it's yesterday or what have you, somewhere along the line, we felt that feeling of exclusion. And I can guarantee it probably did not feel good, right? There's a visceral response. There's a, chemistry around how exclusion makes individuals feel. And the impact and outcome of that are not usually positive. And so realizing that, let's think about that. Why would we want that in our workplaces? Why would we want exclusion to be a reality for any person from any background in our workplaces? If someone's feeling excluded, they can't do their best work. They won't do their best work. They're not going to feel the elements of value, because now they're focused on something else. And that is trying to get rid of that exclusionary feeling. And so if we take the responsibility to create, to do something on our own accord, each and every person, that creates an environment of inclusion, we would have the most beautiful, dynamic workplaces. If everyone did something, one thing, every day that would help another person to feel included, how wonderful would that be? And so my basis of the book is that it's not difficult to create inclusive environments, and we should not be waiting for the HR director, the CEO, the leadership team to create that culture for us. We have a personal responsibility to do it, and we can do it very easily.
Oh my God, I love that.
Which that does hit on the question that I teased up in the very beginning. What is that one simple thing each person can do that's really quick and easy that they could do to help in the workplace to be more inclusive?
Yeah, that is such a wonderful question. And so I'm trying to narrow everything down to one. I think the one thing that we can do is give each other grace, right? Recognizing that we are human, and because we are human, we are imperfect. Giving others grace and latitude to be able to get into the space of inclusion takes time, right? And so if we give someone that latitude and don't just write them off automatically because of our biases, because we feel uncomfortable, because they may have said something that was a little off, right? Somewhere along the line, let's give them grace. And through that grace, create understanding to their perspective. I think that's the biggest thing. We're so quick to write someone off. Oh, they said XYZ. The guy with the hat. Oh, he has that hat. Nope, can't deal with that, right?
Yep.
But give them grace to be who they are, and to allow them the space to be able to provide more information about their perspectives and how they see the world. And once we do that, Now we have the opportunity to bridge the gap and close the gap a little bit, because we're not pointing the finger, we're actually opening the hand for people to come in and share.
I think that's amazing, because that's something everyone can do, right?
Yeah.
Just giving everybody that breath and ability to be themselves.
To stay back and understand.
Continue to train or retrain your brain not to jump to conclusions or to biases.
That's it, exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Which a lot of time we go back, it's very easy to go back to this bias or whatever when you're stressed at work and everything. So it's really stepping back. And like you say at the beginning, looking into yourself.
Yes.
Right? That's really something that resonates so much with me, is looking at yourself so that you understand, so that you can go towards the others.
Absolutely. We're not as wonderful and perfect as we think we are, right? We all have work to do, and if we do that first, then we can have a better opportunity to connect with people and appreciate them for who they are.
And include.
Delphia, do you have any parting words or anything else you might want to share with us?
Well, this has been a phenomenal conversation. I thank you for having me. One thing that I just I'll leave with is the reality that if we look at the word inclusion, the way in which it's spelled, inclusion begins with I, and it always needs you, right? Think of the letters that are in there, right? And so inclusion is a reality that will help us to have greater success in connectivity and opportunities as we go forward, navigating our landscape in the workplace and outside of the workplace, building more BFFs, all of those things. If we know in our heart of hearts that inclusion cannot exist without the letter I, and it cannot exist without you.
Oh, I love that. Delphia, this conversation has just been so moving. I mean, I'm gotten chills a couple of times, and definitely some ideas of things that I can do to lean in. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your experiences, and for even just reminding us. I mean, some of these things we do know, but just having the conversation really helps. So we so appreciate it. I think all of us could sit there and say that daily commitment you propose to us is not a hard thing to do, but it's something we all should lean in on. And I just feel like the more we think about the importance of the Work Bestie community, that we all are allies of each other and have the opportunity to really take this to the next level. So with that, I just want to say thank you for these actionable insights. And we do want to make sure, just like you said, all you work besties, inclusion does start with I, but it incorporates you. So please be a part of this and really take that small shift each day.
Yeah. And thank you so much again for your time and this positivity. Where can our listeners connect with you, learn more about your book, about your work?
Yes, sure. So you can find me on LinkedIn. Again, I think I'm the only Delphia Howze out there, right? And you can find me on LinkedIn. You can also find information on my website, dhousesolutions.com, and also on Instagram.
Perfect. And we'll make sure to put the link in our, bio and stories, show notes.
Yes. And you can find the book on Amazon. It's Including You, Leading Inclusion from Where You Are. Purchase the book, send me a picture, and I'll add you all to the wall of inclusion, anyone to the wall of inclusion, those who are willing to take the journey to be more inclusive.
Perfect.
I feel like that's a call to attention for us.
Yes.
We'll find a way to join that.
Work Besties, you heard Delphia. It is your turn. So this week, take one intentional step towards inclusion. Invite someone into a conversation, champion a coworker's idea, support them. And of course, as usual, tag us at Work Besties Who Podcast. Tell us about it. And don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe. Thank you all. Until next time.
Bye. Bye. Remember, whether you're swapping snacks in the break room, rescuing each other from endless meetings, or just sending that perfectly timed meme, having a work bestie is like having your own personal hype squad.
So keep lifting each other up, laughing through the chaos, and of course, thriving. Until next time, stay positive, stay productive, and don't forget to keep supporting each other.